Hello, everyone, and welcome to our BCCC Meet Our Member campaign. Today, we're hosting Jamile Cruz, CEO and founder at IND 101, to share with you her hands-on approach that have been helping companies to create a more inclusive culture. Jamile, hello and welcome.
Hi, Carol. Nice being here with you.
Yeah, nice having you here. So why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself and about IND 101. How did it all start?
Okay. Well, as Carol said, I'm Jamile Cruz. I'm a Brazilian Canadian. So I landed in Canada in 2006, engineering background. So I came here to work for an engineering consulting firm, do an internship. The idea was to stay just for a year, but I joined a mining project. And with that, it became 4 years quite suddenly. And I've been here since then. So from engineering to mining to project management, to me, one of the things that always called my attention was the way we relate to people when we're developing large capital projects. And once I moved into management consulting and start participating in large project transformations for organizations, touching every single layer of the organization became more critical. This concept of how we see people in organizations and the opportunities and the abilities and how we use skills towards actually developing high-performing organizations, and the concepts around inclusion, equity, and diversity became quite clear to me that not every organization was well-versed or really understanding of the ways how the systems were designed to most times exclude people. So the opportunities are really not available for everybody. So once I had the opportunity with the employer that I was at the time, I put my hands up and ended up becoming their inclusion diversity lead for Canada. And then from that experience, we start developing new ways of having the conversation, of really connecting with leadership and employees on how to have a discussion about the position that everybody has towards behaviors and towards how we actually communicate and relate to people within the organizations, how we attract people to operate or be part of these sectors and industry we discuss. So yeah, that's how IND 101 was born. I saw a way of defining business priorities from a different perspective. I think in 2017, when we start having this conversation more towards committing to a business priority around inclusion diversity, wasn't quite set on how to do this. So I saw an opportunity there to have a discussion with organizations that were more focused on strategy, KPIs, and like through business priorities, talking about a subject that for many at the time was very conceptual.
So thank you for this broad explanation. So who is your ideal client? What kind of organization does IND 101 support?
Okay, that's a great question. I truly believe that we need to match consulting to the type of organizations that can really use the support and really work together. One thing that I learned in my consulting life is that the fact that you should be a trusted advisor, right? That you need to create relationships so you can really help the organizations that you're working with. For us, we're very interested in working with companies that made a true commitment, meaning they said and they recognize in their values that inclusion, equity, and diversity is an important part of them becoming a sustainable and responsible organization. So our clients, they are in a very large span of industries and sectors. Most of them still sit in mining because that's where I started my career or spend most time of my career. So that's where my relationships are and where we are spending a lot of the time developing organizations. But we have clients on that are law firms, commercial real estate, retail, and a few not-for-profits. But yeah, the ideal client or the companies we really are interested in working on are companies that are committed to make this work better.
Amazing. So why is it so important for a company to focus on a hands-on DEI strategy?
I'll go back to my initial answer on the concept or on the idea that equity, diversity, inclusion is very conceptual. And I think we can easily take from concept to practical ways of doing things, meaning when an organization, if I use a digital strategy as an example, when they say we want to digitalize our company, they'll go through very specific steps to analyze technologies and ways of thinking on the new digital world and specify how they're going to achieve those goals, right? How AI is going to be implemented, how Internet of Things will be applied to the design of a plant or whatever it is that they intend to do. when we talk about inclusion, equity, and diversity, companies usually have this idea, okay, we're just going to do a quick unconscious bias training or different like simple solutions that end up not being quite simple and maybe sometimes even having like the opposite effect of what they desire. So my goal here is to really coach organizations on treating equity, diversity, and inclusion as a true business priority, meaning assign an executive leader to sponsor this project, assign a team to execute it, develop a strategy that's linked to the business goals, really understand the culture. This is a cultural change. So we'll have a change management process attached to this whole work. So we need to really understand what are the elements of the organization that will change by making a true commitment and making the change required to systems, processes, and people behaviors to really commit to the change.
It's a change of mindset in the end, right? It's the same, like and cultural change doesn't happen like overnight. It takes time and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of commitment. So, so what kind of services do you provide to companies?
So our range of services goes from the actual exercise of creating a framework or a strategy. So we connect with organizations first to define an ambition. So what is it that they're trying to do? What are the concepts around inclusion, diversity, and equity that they have within their team? So from launching that vision or defining that vision together, then we move into diagnostic. I think that's one thing that companies don't seem to have a handle on it yet, but it's quite important to really understand where people are, what are the experiences that people are facing in their organizations right now, how the systems impact different groups in their organization. So we usually run through a full diagnostic to help organizations to understand the status quo. And then from there, we make an evaluation of the systems and the things that needs to change, prioritize the actions, and really develop a 3-year to 5-year framework for the organizations to start this change management process and really take the actions that are required to improve the situation.
So, I mean, you mentioned there's diagnostic and then implementation. So what are the steps that you take and how do you actually work with the companies? It's like a weekly meeting? How does the process works?
We engage on workshops with key leadership members at the beginning. So if we're talking about a big mining organization, for example, we're going to invite in the GM, so operational leaders, HR leader, the top people in the organization to really talk to us about the storyline, right? Why is this important to this organization? What are we trying to achieve here? What are the challenges that you that you see coming our way when we start having this conversation? So we can pinpoint the mindsets that will have to be addressed. Once we have that first workshop and define this vision, then we'll go into the detailed diagnostics. So that can include one-on-one interviews, focus groups, surveys. So we're really trying to capture everything we can learn from an organizational perspective and the experiences that people are having in the culture of this organization. And then from there, we go through a new sequence of workshops where first we validate what we found throughout the diagnostic. And then really, you probably have been part of many strategy workshops. So we go into prioritization exercises, really connecting the challenges that we found with solutions that can potentially fix or develop ways of connecting and dealing with those challenges. So that's kind of the scope that we take up front. And then when we get to solution implementation, so we define the actions that the company will take, we'll do the coaching, the training, all the support system that they're required to essentially enable them to execute. I'm not a big believer of having very large consulting teams sitting at the client for many, many years and then them leaving and that knowledge leaving with them. The idea here is that we'll coach and support the organizations for them to be able to deliver. And I&D should be embedded in everything they do. So if we're not changing the everyday works of that organization, then we're not doing the changes we really need to see.
Yeah, like really helping them to walk on their own feet, right? And like by the time you leave, they're ready to go on their own. Yeah, exactly. This is incredible. So, I mean, beside helping companies in their diversity and inclusion journeys, you've also led some industry-wide initiatives like the development of the action plan for advancement of women in the Brazilian mining industry that was published by IBRAM, the Brazilian Mining Institute, and supported by the Women in Mining in Brazil, and BCCC are happy to support the action plan as well. What are the results so far, and how those initiatives are actually changing the mining sector in Brazil?
What I love about this whole project was that we essentially develop a way for the industry to connect over this topic, right? So Women in Mining Brazil started from our session at PDAC in 2019, where by launching this project and having a conversation about the need for an action plan, we essentially had a group of people coming together and saying, we need more than this, right? So the more than this became an actual movement called Women in Mining Brazil. We got a whole set of organizations. We started with 2 organizations signing at the pre-launch exercise that we did at PDAC 2020 to say, here's an action plan supported by the government of Canada, supported by organizations in Brazil. And from there, a bunch of companies saying, okay, I get it. There is a place to go there. It's related to strategic thinking and action-based, where we can structure our programs and really understand how to move towards a better inclusion of women in mining. So right now we're like reaching, I think, 27 companies who signed this call to action. So essentially part of the exercise of putting this action plan together was figuring out ways of engaging organizations and engaging members of the mining industry. So we put a letter in front of organizations saying, please sign here. So organizational leaders signed this commitment to not only implement the actions, but also monitor the results. So we've just issued our first progress report. This progress report essentially looks into the KPIs associated with all these 80 strategies that are on the action plan and measure organizations on this progress. So we started, for example, with companies participating on this IBRAN survey being around 13% women participation in the mining industry in Brazil. Now we just, with the 16 companies that participated in the first report, we got to around 15%. Hopefully next year, with the 27 companies responding to this survey, we'll get to a better understanding of where we are. And we're also helping each other. So some of the conversations with the companies that we call the signatories to the action plan, they come together and we're having many questions, and the evolution of the discussion is what's exciting to me as a company and as a person, as a woman in mining, because you can see how the request from the organizations now is to look into what happens when we're talking about Indigenous women, what happens when we're talking about Black women. Do we need a different cut of the KPIs to understand the realities of different groups? So you can see the heavy involvement that everybody's having to essentially improve the process and ensure that we're being quite fair to the changes we want to make to the industry. Plus, really like this excitement around having a way to have the conversation that's very structured in a way that we can prove that we're making advances.
And that you're monitoring the progresses, right? So it's, and that's the thing, it's, I think that's the most important thing, is like to monitor the progress and to continue to have the conversation, because the culture is slowly changing, and hopefully we will continue to change for many more years. And I think that I'm very excited to have other companies joining the Women in Mining Brazil and have other signatories. So if you're a mining company, if you're operating in Brazil, go to the Women in Mining website and join this initiative, because it's really making a difference. So Jamile, thank you very, very much for your time and for your partnership. I would like to congratulate you once again for being awarded this year one of the 2021 Business Changemakers by the Globe and Mail. Well-deserved prize. And we're also like to point that we're very honored to have you leading our Diversity and Inclusion Committee, because we learn from you every single day. So thank you very, very much for being here today. And if you want to learn more about ING 101 and how they can help your company, please go to www.ing101.com or reach out to us, and we'll be happy to connect you with Jamile. If you're interested in learning more about the BCCC and how we can support your company, please contact us at info@braskenchamber.org. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again, Jamile, for being here, and for you hearing us today. Stay safe and healthy, and I see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.